We got biggest risers and fallers today on the show, and we're going to discuss through 10 days, now 11 days of training camp practice, who have the guys that have ascended and who have the guys that could have had better days. We are going to get into it all right after this, but you already know what to do. Drop an SDS in the chat, smash that like button, and let's cook. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Love to see it. What is good, gang? The 49ers just got done with their final practice before they get ready to head on over to okay, here we go. Before they head over to the Raiders for joint practices. So far, pretty underwhelmed with some of the coverage because all we've gotten is some uh camp stats today. We haven't got a bunch of context, but you know what? Nick Wagner saving us just dropped some context on the timeline so we can look at that together. We could react to what is happening down there at Santa Clara. I don't know, something about just training camp stats that are put out there, that are floated out there with absolutely zero context or nuance to it. Just it's almost to the point where it's like infuriating because it tells me nothing. It literally tells me nothing. In fact, it probably gives me more actual questions about what happened at practice than it actually provides answers. I'm just not a fan of just training camp stats. It's been one of the most interesting things that we've seen thus far. But one stat that I think we can pull something from is Jake Moody. Now, here's a stat I can vibe with. Jake Moody went 2 for 2 from 60 yards today. Jake Moody is your franchise kicker. I absolutely love to see it. Great stuff. Good stuff. All right, let's see. Why isn't it allowing me? So I want to pull up Nick Wagner's tweets. He's actually done a phenomenal job of putting together some threads after practice of providing some additional context. So I want to get Nick's stuff up here and we can take a look. So this is from Nick Wagner. These are his training camp notes from today. He says a bit lighter session after a long, tough one yesterday. Focused seemed to drift a bit today as Niners likely looking ahead to Las Vegas. I counted about half dozen drops among the pass catchers. More on this in a bit. He says quarterback Brock Purdy at 23 reps, all with the first team. 8 of 14, started 4 for 4, included a well-placed deep out to Ayuk. Also had miscommunication with Deebo Samuel for an incompletion. Purdy was a tick late on a couple throws too, resulting in misfires behind his target. Marked 2 sacks down with Purdy on the field, both of which would be created by defensive tackle Javon Hargrave. There we go. He said it before, and repeating myself, Hargrave looks every bit the part of a $20 million a year defensive tackle, a menace. Love that. We got some context. Here we go. This is great information from Nick Wagner. I haven't seen anything else come out just yet, but we'll keep an eye on it. So sounds like Brock Purdy, the 49ers offense, first string offense, at least what we can talk about right now. Little bit of a up and down day. Good throws, bad throws on the day. So trying to see if he dropped anything else on any of the other quarterbacks, but it does provide a little bit of context, defensive line continuing to create sacks. That's been a common theme of training camp so far. So nothing crazy there. Purdy was a tick late on a couple throws too, resulting in misfires behind his targets. Purdy, for the most part, has been pretty on time with his throws, so that's a bit uncharacteristic of him for the last, I would say, like 2 days of practice. So sounds like sounds like it wasn't the best day, at least for the first string offense and Brock Purdy. But it also does sound like they are prepared and getting ready for the Raiders. So I'll continue to wait and see what else we get from some of these other beat reporters. Looks like Lombardi reported 49ers rookie tight end Cameron Latu on his drops today. The drops are on me. It's unacceptable. I've got to get on the jugs machine. It's unacceptable to drop any passes. Unfortunately for Cameron Latu, drops has been one of the more defining aspects of his game throughout training camp. I would say one of the most consistent things that Cameron Latu has done so far is drop the football. Um, whether it's in warmups, whether it's in one-on-ones, whether it's in team, he's definitely struggled in that aspect. So hopefully it's just early struggles, but hopefully it's something that can get moving forward. Um, let's see. So didn't sound like the best practice offensively. Sounds like the 49ers defensive line continues to cook. But let's talk about training camp more holistically. Let's talk about the first 10 days. 9 of those days I was available to watch all of the practice. So let's talk about guys who have took steps forward, I would say, throughout training camp. This guy's been a name that I've talked about quite a bit, so I don't think it's going to be much of a surprise to anyone. But I could make the case that based on expectations of what TDP had going into this year, I would say TDP probably one of the biggest risers in all of training camp. Ty Davis Price absolutely solidified himself on this roster. I know there were questions about Ty Davis Price potentially being on the bubble, especially with Kalen Laborn coming in. As you probably saw today, Ronald Awatt was let go. They brought in Jeremy McNichols as a result. But I really do think that Ty Davis Price, the question about him being on the team next year was a legitimate question based on how he played last year. So watching TDP in practice all 9 days, he looked fantastic. He's one of my favorite stories of training camp just because he was kind of on that bottom rung, hasn't met expectations, former third round draft pick. We know these former third round draft picks, running backs specifically for the 49ers, got a bad rap. So it felt like he was going to be, it was going to be hard for him to dodge that perception. And I really do think that TDP has completely dodged it. He's solidified himself as probably the RB4, but a quality RB4. So I'm really excited about TDP. I thought he did a really quality job. Um, so I'm going to kind of bounce around between risers. I'm going to bounce around and curious, who is your nephew? I'm going to kind of bounce around from risers, fallers, guys that I think have taken steps forward, and guys who maybe either didn't meet expectations or have kind of stumbled a little bit. And again, what I am talking about is I'm not here to tear any of these players down. I'm not here to be like, this guy's trash, get him out of here. This guy needs to be gone. Not a football player, none of that. Not going to be talking about it like that, but I'm just going to be talking about it from the sense of kind of where the expectation was heading into camp and what we kind of got out of it. So for this first faller, I would have to say Ambry Thomas has had a difficult training camp. Ambry Thomas has had difficult training camps now for the third year in a row, and I don't know what that means for his future. All I know is that Ambry Thomas, former third round draft pick, he is a guy that has to kind of prove it, I think. He's a guy that has to come out here and really prove to his coaching staff that he's deserving of a spot, because we're going to talk about this guy's nephew in a second, because there is some talented players behind him. And Ambry right now, I mean, is constantly trailing, constantly. He had one really good rep against George Kittle with a pass breakup. That's really the only like quality rep that I think I've seen out of Ambry. And I believe Ambry's in a competition right now. And I believe Ambry's in a competition with our guys. He said nephew, Deshaun Jameson. Deshaun Jameson for sure is pushing on Ambry, and Deshaun Jameson could be the reason why Ambry doesn't have a roster spot this year. So it's twofold. It's twofold with Ambry. Ambry isn't performing, I don't think, to the level that he should be. He is a talented player, I think, but he's just always out of position. He's always finding himself on the wrong side of completions. And on top of that, the 49ers have a quality undrafted free agent in Deshaun Jameson, who the coaching staff really likes. He's shown a lot of promise this year, and this could be the guy that knocks Ambry out. So if there wasn't a guy that could take Ambry's spot, Ambry's probably safe. But because you have a guy like Deshaun Jameson who's really nipping at his heels, and he's younger, he's cheaper, and this is going to be a really interesting scenario for Ambry Thomas this year. Ambry Thomas hasn't had the camp that he needed. So my assumption is that he will be considered as a roster cut candidate. So Ambry Thomas didn't really have the best camp imaginable that I thought he should have, especially heading into year 3 and just a lot of pressure on Ambry. I don't think he really met the bill this year. Another guy, a riser, a big time riser. Again, arguably based on expectation, based on the way he's perceived. All of those things go into consideration when talking about a riser and a faller. A lot of people have counted out Javon Kinlaw. A lot of people call Javon Kinlaw a bust, and I understand he hasn't been available. He's been hurt. He has definitely been on the sidelines more than he's been on the field. So a lot of people are out on Javon Kinlaw. Javon Kinlaw has quietly had one of the best camps out of anyone on this team. And I get it. You don't gotta all of a sudden just hop on the hype train. It's not what we're talking about. We're being completely honest in regards to the way Javon Kinlaw has bounced back this year. I've said it a million times and I'll continue to say it. He looks like a completely different player in regards to physique, in regards to explosion, in regards to first step get off. In regards to just having a bag of pass rush moves, Javon Kinlaw looks fantastic. Javon Kinlaw looks phenomenal. And again, this isn't like I thought Javon Kinlaw looked good last training camp and last joint practices. He was pancaking, starting left guards for the Minnesota Vikings during joint practices. So I thought he looked good. Remember, he even had the sack in the preseason game against the Vikings, and we were all like, finally, Javon's looking good. He looks 3 times as good as the Javon we saw last year. So it's crazy. It's a different scenario with Javon. He looks healthy. He's faster. I mean, Javon Kinlaw could create some havoc, especially as a rotational defender. Javon Kinlaw could absolutely be a guy that might not be a starter, but is a heavy rotational player, and you can stunt him now. Like, I see a guy that you could loop, like you could have Eric crash down. You could like Javon is fast enough that he could loop around and get home. I wouldn't say he was fast enough to do that last year. So Javon has been one of the bigger risers of training camp, man. He really, really has. Um, I think Javon has looked absolutely phenomenal. Um, so we kind of talked about it already, and again, I don't. I'm just trying to provide the insight the way that I see it. I'm an internal optimist when it comes to talking about football, so I really don't like bagging on players. If you've followed me or you've messed with my channel for a long time, that's not something that I do, because I think there's a way to kind of quantify any potential issues or things that happen. So again, when I'm talking about a faller, I'm not ripping these guys. It's just based on expectation and things like that. I think Cameron Latu right now has left a little bit to be desired, and you heard it. You heard it today. My thing with Latu is drops, and so what we're trying to discern is is it a concentration? Is it a confidence thing of why the drops are happening? Um, or is he just have kind of not the best hands? So a positive about Latu is that I think Latu has surprised me a little bit with his route running. I think in one-on-ones versus Jair Brown, Latu's been able to create separation. So I think Latu has kind of helped. I was worried about his ability to create separation. I feel like he's proven to me he can separate. The biggest issue right now with Latu is just coming down with the ball, just catching it, right? And so I have Latu right now as a faller. Again, he's got the third round draft capital into him, and he's struggling right now with drops, and it's been a consistent theme of his game throughout training camp. So I don't think I can't determine yet if it's a Vance McDonald situation. You know what I mean? Like Vance McDonald, I he I did I watched enough Vance McDonald at Rice to know that he had no hands. And I was absolutely against that draft pick because he couldn't catch the football. But what we did see out of Vance is he was able to kind of correct that later on down the line. So I don't think we have enough sample size to definitively say that he's got a problem with his hands, but we do know that it's just something that it's on our radar, and we're gonna keep our eyes on. So I think Latu has plenty of room for improvement. Like I said, he can separate. I think he has an ability to be a quality blocker as well. So right now, just wanted to see Latu come down with it a little bit more. And I think if that happened, um, he would be in much better shape. So, but kind of countering that for a riser, Braden Willis has been a riser. Braden Willis has looked really good. Braden Willis, to me, if you would have told me Braden Willis was the third round tight end and Cameron Latu was the seventh round tight end, I would absolutely believe that. Because I feel like Braden Willis is proving that he is a pretty dynamic player with the ball in his hands. Um, Braden Willis has been consistently targeted by whichever 49ers quarterback he's played with. For the most part, he's brought down most of the footballs that are thrown his way. He's made some pretty quality catches. He's been able to show that he can do it after the catch as well. So, just to kind of compare and contrast, I would say Braden Willis for sure is hands down the best rookie tight end throughout training camp so far. So, like I said, if you flip those guys draft like where they were drafted, I wouldn't even question it. If you're like Braden Willis was the guy we took in the third round and we took Latu in the seventh, I'd be like, makes sense. But the reason why I think Latu ended up as a fault is just, again, expectation. When you're a third round draft pick or a comp third pick, there's more expectation, I think, that comes along with it. So again, doesn't mean we're defining who Latu is. We're still learning who Latu is. Latu, I've only seen him a handful of times, so I'm not defining who Latu is, and I'm not defining Latu as a guy who can't catch. It's just a trend that we picked up through the first 9 days of training camp, and it's one of the things that I think we would have liked to see improved. So, but again, like I said, on the flip side, Braden Willis has been a riser. I think there's an opportunity that Braden Willis sees the field more in game time situations right now opposed to Cameron Latu. So you got that going for you. Let's see what other. So we're kind of bouncing back and forth. So let's see a guy that maybe hasn't met the level of expectation. Let's see, who else do we got? Looking across the defensive line, I think the defensive line has done a pretty solid job in the most part. Um, I would say a riser of training camp would be Callie said Brad, can Latu separate from defenders? Yeah, that was one of the things that Latu proved to me was that, like, again, in I would say every rep that I got my eyes on Latu in one-on-one versus Jair Brown, he created separation on Jair Brown. But again, the ball would get thrown to him, and it reminded me of like when you kind of like just kind of your hands overlap and the ball just kind of hits you in the hands and you just don't bring it in. So he's able to create separation, at least on Jair Brown. And he did it multiple times, but it's bringing in the catch. I think yesterday he had a catch on Jair and then he had a drop. And I feel like that's kind of where Cameron is right now. He's 50-50. You don't know if it's going to be a catch. Like every 1 out of 2, it's either a catch or a drop. And so again, that's why I'm not ready to define that Latu has legitimate issues with catching. It's just what we've seen so far throughout training camp, but I have seen that he does have an ability to separate. So another riser though, Cleveland Farrell. He had probably his best training camp practice yesterday. One of my favorite plays of Cleveland was on a run play. I talked about it. It was against Trent Williams. He was head up. It looked like it was either an outside. It looked like it was an outside zone, and so Cleveland run fit, eyes outside. CMC looks like he was trying to hit the edge, but because of the way Cleveland managed the run fit, it forced CMC back inside, and then Cleveland he was able to shuck Trent Williams, and he wrapped up CMC for TFL, and I was like, all right, Cleveland's looking pretty darn good right now. Cleveland would have had multiple sacks yesterday. And again, he's showing he can do it in the run game. He's showing he could do it as a pass rusher. Obviously, he's standing in right now for Nick Bosa, but I do anticipate a world that Cleveland and Drake Jackson are rotating on the opposite side of Nick Bosa, or you also have uh, Cleveland stepping in and spelling Bosa. When Bosa finally gets paid, my goodness. Come on, man. Pay that guy. Let's put it to bed. Let's get Nick Bosa paid. Um let's see. I would say there's more risers for sure than guys who like really fell in my opinion. Based on expectations, there was a lot of risers. There's a lot of guys who either surprised me or really stepped up to the challenge. I think you could almost quantify the 49ers wide receiver room as a riser. I think the whole room you could talk about as a riser. You talk about Brandon Ayuk probably been the best player, arguably the best player in all of training camp. He definitely cooled off a little bit towards the end of training camp, but Deebo Samuel has been effective. He's been more consistent this training camp opposed to last training camp. So Debo's been good. Jawan Jennings looks fantastic. Jawan is moving extremely well. Ray has been making plays. Danny Gray has been making plays. Chris Conley's been making plays. Willie Snead has been making plays. Ronnie Bell's been making plays. Isaiah Winstead has been making plays. Like, I think you have to quantify the entire wide receiver room as a riser, which is going to be one of the hardest cut down days, I think, for the 49ers is I think Bell, Conley, Willie Snead, and who else? I feel like I'm missing someone. Are all worthy of being like the sixth wide receiver. I really do think Isaiah Winstead has looked solid. I think Isaiah Winstead, you can really see his length. When the ball is in the vicinity of Isaiah Winstead, he does a really good job of being able to pinpoint the ball and bring it down. Winstead has looked solid. Bell looks like I said, Bell looks like a guy. Conley looks like your consummate professional along with Willie Snead. Comes down to a numbers game, man. Tay Martin, thank you. My God, burying my guy Tay Martin. Tay Martin has looked phenomenal. Tay Martin, the 49ers literally have, like, if we assume right now, I think Danny Gray played well enough that the draft capital that was put into him, the fact that he's a second-year player and he's young and fast, I think there's enough for him to maintain his roster spot. So when you look at Ayuk, Debo, Jawan, Ray, and Gray, I feel like those guys did enough to maintain their roster spot. But it comes down to how many wide receivers are the 49ers going to keep. Last year, they kept 5. This year, it feels like they're going to keep 5 again because are they going to cut one of these tight ends? Braden Willis has played too good to be cut. Shout out, Callie. Thank you for having my back, man. I knew I was missing someone. Braden Willis has played well enough to make this roster. And that's exactly what I thought was going to be the case heading into training camp, that Braden Willis was going to play well enough to be able to earn a spot. But does Kyle Shanahan feel comfortable with the idea of having 2 rookie tight ends behind George Kittle when he's been running more 2 tight end sets as of late? I don't know if he does. And we do know Warner is a quality blocker. And Warner, he's okay. Just hasn't had a ton of opportunities as a pass catcher. He had a good rep in one-on-ones yesterday where he came down with the football. Like, he's capable, but he just doesn't have a ton of opportunities. So it's like that's really going to be one of the biggest questions, one of the hardest roster cut decisions in building out this roster, because the 49ers aren't going to keep four quarterbacks. They got to keep three. They don't have the luxury. It's already a luxury to keep three. They can't keep four. So they're going to keep three quarterbacks. They're going to keep four running backs, one fullback. And then the question is, do they keep five wide receivers and four tight ends, or six wide receivers and three tight ends? Because the 49ers need to keep eight offensive linemen. They need to do that. It has to happen that way. So there are enough wide receivers on this team where I would say Willie Snead could absolutely make the roster. Conley could make the roster. Tay Martin can make the roster. Ronnie Bell could make the roster. Isaiah Winstead, I think, has the best chance of sneaking back to the practice squad. So I think Winstead has been good, though. But I think based on kind of the lack of hype about him, obviously that could all change with a preseason performance or he blows it out. But I think Isaiah Winstead has the best chance at sneaking through to the practice squad. It's going to be a tough Willie Snead has played really well these last couple days. Chris Connolly has been a consistent performer. Tay Martin has been great. Tay Martin's ran with the ones. Tay Martin has caught touchdowns. I don't know if I've seen Tay Martin drop the football training camp. Tay Martin is a quality player. So riser, it's our first room that is a riser. All the wide receivers looked really, really good. So I do not at all want to be in that position of Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch to figure out who's getting cut, because it's going to be stressful. If hopefully no other teams, player personnel departments are listening and watching in, but you never know. But I'm going to go ahead and say that they're not. But if you need a wide receiver, you should be watching the 49ers cut down day, because all those guys that we're talking about, they can be the fifth or sixth guy in any wide receiver room in the NFL. So I don't the whole wide receiver room rising. I really didn't see one wide receiver where I was like, ooh, this guy fell off. I didn't see that. Like Danny Gray. Danny Gray started out slow. Danny Gray, the first two practices, I was like, ooh, he's heading towards the fallers list. And then all of a sudden, he turned it up. So it's going to be hard, man. Whole wide receiver room, risers, all of them, risers. You know what? If we're really on the idea of rooms, I might have to say the quarterback room is a riser as well. Really, like, and again, each individual quarterback has their own perception and expectation heading into training camp. And that's exactly the way I evaluated each individual quarterback. Each individual quarterback has their own set of circumstances and their own level of expectation that doesn't necessarily is the same for the next guy. So, but when you look at the quarterback room as a whole, because if we are looking at Trey Lance compared to last year, Trey Lance was really inconsistent. And if you know anything about me, I am patient with young players. I understand that each player has their own pace of development. And like Ambry, I was super patient with Ambry. I was always like, just let's wait and see with Ambry. Well, we have three training camps now of Ambry, and I haven't seen what I wanted to see, an improvement. with Ambry, so I'm more willing to say that Ambry hasn't met the level of expectation that it comes along with being a third round draft pick. So for Trey specifically, he had an inconsistent camp last year. That was his thing. He had issues with consistent accuracy, consistent ball placement. You could see that Trey could make every throw. It is the level of consistency in which he made every throw was one of the main concerns. So Trey absolutely improved in that category. He absolutely improved in that category. Um, there's still work to be done, but he took big steps from last year to this year. So Trey has taken strides forward. I would say for Sam Darnold as well. Sam Darnold, I have a level of expectation for him. 55 starts, quality. Uh, he has a good arm. You see it on display. He has a good arm. And he can he can sling the rock like he really can. Um, he wasn't perfect, but I would say for the level of expectation, considering no one really had much of an expectation at all for Sam Darnold, I feel like Sam Darnold did a pretty decent job. And then, of course, you look at Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy coming off the surgery that happened in March. We didn't even know if he was going to be participating. Brock Purdy still has on and off days. He's still in a rehab program. Brock has looked fantastic. Brock, based on those set of circumstances, being year 2, recovering from a UCL surgery, and the one thing that you cannot take away from Brock Purdy is that every single day that he stepped onto the practice field, he got better. And that is 100% what you're looking for when you have a guy who is in the middle of a serious rehab process. He's entering year 2. It's his first full season as the starter, so there's already a brand new pressure being placed upon him. And the fact that every single day, at least that I was there, I didn't see what today was, so I can't speak on today. But every day that I was there, Brock Purdy improved, got better and better and better and better. And his most impressive times at practice were move the ball periods, which are should be the periods that are most heavily weighted in regards to evaluating quarterbacks. Move the ball is the most important part of practice for quarterbacks, in my opinion, because it's the closest thing that actually resembles the game. It's a game closest thing that resembles game simulation. You're actually running your offense versus a defense. You're not drilling one type of play. You're not drilling pitches. You're not drilling screens. You're not emphasizing slants. You are running your entire offense. You're calling plays and you're going against your defense. So each and every day, Brock got better. So I would say the quarterback room, even Brandon Allen, man, I had zero expectations for Brandon Allen. Brandon Allen looked pretty. He had some days where he didn't look great, but he also had some days where he looked pretty good. So if I had to really, I know everyone wants to pit these guys against each other because there's this whole situation of my guy's better than your guy. If you really look at the whole 49ers quarterback room holistically and you look at each individual person and in their own individual vacuum of development, each one of them got better. Trey got better than last year. Sam looks more Sam is still Sam, but he still proved that like Sam could win football games with the 49ers. And Brock continued to get better and to me look like the best quarterback out on the field, especially when it came to move the ball. I didn't see the offense look better with anyone else than Brock Purdy. So the entire quarterback room to me was a big time riser. Um, I guess we would have to say for a faller, it pains me to say this because I really like him a lot. I have nothing against him at all. But again, we're trying to be objective as possible, and we're trying to call it what it is. Elijah Mitchell might have been a faller this training camp. I like Elijah a lot. I think a lot Elijah has proven he's gotten better each year too. And Elijah Mitchell's a guy that I really like. And I think he could be an extremely quality back. But the biggest point of emphasis for Elijah was availability. That's the point of emphasis. And on top of that, you have the emergence of Jordan Mason and TDP. Both of them look phenomenal. Both of them, TDP and Jordan Mason, look like they could be a starting 1-2 punch for a team. Obviously, we have CMC, who's unguardable, unstoppable, just a menace. CMC is him. We don't even talk. I don't even talk about CMC because he's CMC. He's the best running back in football. He's the most complete running back in football. As a guy who can do it as a receiver, guy who can do it as a runner, in between the tackles, outside the tackles, there's not a more complete running back in the NFL right now than Christian McCaffrey. There's just not. I mean, I think you could make the case maybe Austin Eckler because of what he does in both the pass and run game. I think that's what you consider a complete back. But CMC, man, different breed, different animal. I mean, you talked about elite skill set. He has an elite skill set. So we don't even talk about him that much. We don't talk about Christian McCaffrey all that often. We're like, hey, guess what? Christian McCaffrey had a phenomenal play. Oh, he had a 70-yard touchdown today. Oh, he caught a one-handed grab in the back of the end zone. Oh, what now? What now? Yeah, he can even throw. Exactly. He can even throw. Um, so I would have to say though, if we're sticking true to trying to identify risers and fallers, I would say that Elijah was a faller. His ability to be unavailable gave more opportunities to Jordan Mason and TDP. And those two guys took full advantage of their opportunities and they look good. They look really good. So I don't know. We this is again, I talked about this before when I went on Bleacher Report and I talked about 4 underrated players for the San Francisco 49ers heading into this year. And this was before training camp. Jordan Mason was at the top of my list. And my biggest caveat was Elijah Mitchell's health. Because I feel like if Elijah Mitchell could stay healthy, he would be able to keep Jordan Mason back. But I in that segment that I did, I said if Elijah gets hurt and that opens the door for Jordan Mason, that is going to be trouble for Elijah and that is going to benefit Mason because we know Mason is going to take advantage of his opportunities and that's what he's done. So Mason can do it. He's also a complete back. He can do it between the tackles, he can do it outside the tackles, and he can also do it in the passing game. So I think you might have to quantify. I think you do might have to quantify Elijah as a faller, unfortunately, and it's really not due to performance. It's just due to availability. And Brian says, "Do you think the new running back signing means trade coming?" Honestly, because it was they swapped out running back for running back, a Watt, undrafted free agent, they got rid of him, and they brought in Jeremy McNichols, who had a stint with the 49ers as well. You know, I don't I don't know if that necessarily speaks to a trade because you still got Laybourne. Laybourne looks like he could be a guy that makes the roster. I think it's more about having a special teams guy. I think when Psych. Am I back? Do we have everyone? Y'all see me? Sorry about that. I swiped on my I got one of these. So I swiped and it went it kicked me out of my own live. Oh my gosh, what were we talking about? What were we talking about? Uh we're talking about running backs. We were talking about Jeremy McNichols. I think Jeremy McNichols is here more for special teams. That's kind of the way I looked at it. The sound is low. I think the sound starts low, picks back up. So McNichols, I think, is more here for special teams and depth for preseason as well, because I think it is important that, you know, it doesn't sound like Elijah Mitchell will be able to be available for preseason. So that's another element or aspect to it. But as we've discussed, the emergence of TDP, Jordan Mason, and Kalen Laybourne could open up conversations for the 49ers to try to get some value for one of those guys. So, and if the 49ers have gotten to a point where, again, they're like, man, Elijah is having a really hard time with his availability, and they think they can get a third or fourth rounder for Elijah, that's, I think, where that conversation comes into play. I don't think McNichols has anything to do with that. I think if a running back trade is going to happen, it's going to be because they felt like they could flip Elijah for the best value, because he's a former 6th-round draft pick. He's got production, he's got tape, and if you can flip that for a third rounder, that's where you're taking your kind of fandom hat off. You're putting your GM cap on, and you're like, we're trying to get value. We have TDP, Jordan Mason, and Kalen Laybourne. Those guys can make the roster. They're like, are we going to pay Elijah Mitchell? Are we going to pay Elijah Mitchell in a year or two from now with JP Mason and TDP on the roster? Or do we flip Mitchell now and get a draft pick, get an edge, get something, and then I don't know. It's a thought process. It's out there. We'll see. We'll see. We had a camp body in AWAT. Yeah, that's why I think it's more special teams related. Also special teams related, also kind of preseason related, because I don't know if Elijah Mitchell is going to be there, and maybe they've seen enough from AWAT. I don't know. Can they flip Mitchell with his injury history? I mean, the 49ers flip Matt Breida for a 5th-round draft pick. And I think Elijah Mitchell is a better running back than Matt Breida, even with the injury history. He's still young. I think Mitchell carries value. It'll be interesting to see what that value could be perceived to be by other teams. But, the 49ers, they flipped Jeff Wilson for a 5th rounder. He was an undrafted free agent as well. So they've done it in the past. And if you've got a 6th rounder invested into Elijah, I don't think you flip Elijah for a 5th. I don't even know if they would flip him for a 4th. But if you get a 3rd, I think that's a conversation you got to have. So we'll see. We'll see what that looks like. Let's see. So that was I got Elijah kind of as a faller, just not being available. I'm gonna do another room. I'm gonna do another room because there's just too many. There's just too many guys to talk about. We talked about this position in depth heading into training camp as going to be one of the toughest cuts, and it's proven to be exactly that. I think one of the biggest risers as a room is the linebacker room. The linebacker room has looked fantastic. Marcelino McCrary Ball, D. Winters, Jalen Graham, DFF. Fantastic. We already know Dre Greenlaw. We already know Fred Warner. I think Oren Burks has looked good. This is going to be a hard cut. It's going to be hard because DFF has played well. DFF has played well. Marcelino McCrary balls all over the field. D Winters is starting to pop every practice. Jalen Graham is all over the backfield. That's a tough spot to be in. That is a tough spot to be in. This linebacker room is fantastic. Absolutely, absolutely phenomenal. Linebacker room looks good. Linebacker room looks great. And that is going to be another hard situation for the 49ers because they have so many quality players at the position. They're not going to be able to keep them all. Who knows if they're going to be able to bring these guys back around to the practice squad. It is going to be a hard decision for the linebackers, but the linebackers have been one of the biggest risers of all of training camp. They've looked pretty damn good. Nickel cornerbacks have looked pretty good too. Isaiah Oliver and Samuel Womack. I really like those two guys. Isaiah Womack, Samuel Womack. I mean, even Charvarius Ward, as he's gotten more acclimated as of late. Diamador Lenore. I think those guys are going to have a pretty solid year. So, I mean, Talanoa Hufanga, like you might even be able to talk about Talanoa Hufanga as a riser. Like this is the best version of Talanoa Hufanga that I've ever seen. Again, I told you guys that he was a standout to me as a rookie. He was a guy that I was firmly on my radar as a rookie with how he played in training camp. This is by far the best version of Talanoa Hufanga that we've seen. He looks bigger. He looks thicker. He looks stronger. He looks faster. He looks more instinctual. Hufanga is going to go back-to-back All-Pro. It's going to happen. Hufanga looks phenomenal. He looks like one of the best players on the defense. He's everywhere. He is everywhere. The physicality that he brings in press, his ability to cover the top and, basically play deep middle and do whatever he needs to do in coverage. Talanoa Hufanga has been fantastic, man. He's been great. Tashawn Gibson continues to be the opportunistic god, just picking off tip ball after tip ball. There's way more positives on this team. There are way more risers on this team than guys that have kind of maybe not met the bill. I would definitely say it's weighted heavily, which is a good thing. Like there hasn't always been training camps where like we come out of camp and we're like, oh yeah, it's everyone's played well. We were like, no, there were some definite fallers this camp. But I can't. It's really hard to really pinpoint those types of guys. This training camp, there's way fewer than guys that have been just balling. I've been really impressed with a lot of the guys throughout training camp. Does McCrary Ball make this team this year? He has to. He has to. I don't see how he can't. I mean, because this is what I anticipate is going to happen. McCrary Ball is going to play in the preseason, and he's going to ball out, and everyone's going to see it. Everyone's going to see his speed. Everyone's going to see his instincts. Everyone's going to see him playing behind the line of scrimmage. They're going to see him in coverage, and they're going to be like, "Oh, who's that guy?" He's got to make the roster. I don't see how he can't, and that's why it's a hard decision to make because you got Oren Burks, you got DFF, you've got Jalen Graham, you've got D Winters. It's tough, man. Super tough. Super tough. Someone wants to trade Dre Greenlaw. Why would we trade Dre Greenlaw? Dre Greenlaw is on a steal of a deal. The 49ers right now are getting so much value on Dre Greenlaw's contract. Um, it wouldn't make sense to trade Greenlaw unless you get a Kings unless it's one of those situations where you just get an offer where you're like, okay, we have to consider this because the value just is out of this world. But I don't think there's any type of scenario where you're going out of your way to trade Drake Greenlaw. Um, the only way that would ever even be considered is if they just got an offer that was like too good to pass up. But I don't see that necessarily happening at all. Dre's been phenomenal all training camp per usual. Dre's been phenomenal. Not George. Fred has been great. Those two guys are going to be the best uh, middle linebacker duo next year. It's not even going to be in a question, and you're getting immense value on Dre Greenlaw. So because hey, shout out to the 49ers. They paid someone before their breakout opposed to after their breakout. So therefore they got a value. I wish we saw more of that, to be honest. I wish the 49ers would pay guys before they broke out. like Brandon Ayuk is going to break out. He's going to he's Brandon Ayuk's going stupid this year. There's no question about it. And it's going to be really difficult come contract time to probably get a deal done because Brandon Ayuk knows he's going to be worth top dollar. And are the 49ers going to pay that to two wide receivers? They should, but will they? I don't know. At least with the Dre Greenlaw one, they got ahead of it. And definitely. Oh, I agree. I agree with this. He broke out already. But when we say breakout, we're talking about like national standards. Like Brandon Ayuk wasn't in the top 100. Brandon Ayuk isn't in Pro Bowl consideration. Brandon Ayuk isn't even considered to be one of the best wide receiver twos, I think, outside of 49ers fans or like people who really, really pay attention. I don't think Ayuk has broken out from that standard. And I think that's what happens this year is that this year people won't be able to like, oh, Ayuk and like people like if you talk to the average fan, right? Average fan is a way to gauge it because first of all, average fans are stupid, but the average fan also kind of regurgitates kind of national talking points. So that's why I say like that's kind of the bar because when you have these kind of echo chambers of just standard kind of let's call it what it is, kind of dumb fans who just kind of regurgitate headlines, and that's not you guys. If you are in this live right now, you are not one of those fans. I want to make that abundantly clear because that means you're invested. That means you want to know as much about this team as possible. You're not an average fan. The average fan are these guys that play, probably got like one fantasy league. They watch, whatever, and they just regurgitate talking points. Um, so when he gets to that level, that's I think when the national breakout occurs, and I absolutely think that happens this year. Ayuk's going crazy. Ayuk's going crazy. Let's see. Average fan watches Colin. Did you hear what Colin did today? Colin, man. Like, man, Colin. Bro might get canceled over what he said today. But we're gonna find out, man. He said something he shouldn't have. Definitely not very sensitive or emotionally intelligent statement that he made. I haven't even talked about Daz Newsome. Throw Daz Newsome into the wide receiver category. Um, biggest riser, biggest riser of so I haven't talked about the offensive line. The offensive line has been really hard to evaluate, and I'm gonna keep it a buck as someone who considers offensive line a specialty of mine. I consider myself an O-line expert, even though I still got plenty to learn about O-line and plenty more that I can continue to learn. I would say I'm qualified to evaluate the offensive line. It's really hard. It's really hard to evaluate offensive line in training camp. It's because there's so much going on. In team drills is where I really want to evaluate these guys. Because you got to see how they're managing protections, how they're passing off stunts, how they're picking up blitzes, how they're working together in tandem, how they're getting to second level, how they're reading the defense. It's really hard to determine those things in training camp. So I would say just based on a really uneducated level of evaluation, because like I said, I haven't just been watching the O line. I've been watching primarily the quarterbacks because that's just been such a big point of emphasis this training camp. I've watched a lot of quarterback. Um, I would say that the O line is even. I wouldn't say they're risers. I wouldn't say they're fallers. I would say that they're about even. I think obviously Aaron Banks has not been a part of padded practices. So you've had Poe at left guard, you've had Feliciano at left guard. You also have Jalen Moore got hurt really early on. So you also have Leroy Watson playing a lot of snaps at left tackle. Um, I think Colton McKivitz and Spencer Burford have looked pretty solid. So I feel pretty good about Spencer Burford and Colton McKivitz. I think they've done a pretty good job together. I think Brendel looks good. I think Trent is Trent. Um, Trent did Trent did have a little bit of struggle with Cleveland Farrell yesterday, but for the most part, Trent is Trent. So I would just say, O line's been pretty even from what I've been able to watch, because also the defensive line's been getting home. Defensive line has been creating havoc. They've been sacking the quarterback. They've been getting after him. So I got to give a lot of credit to the defensive line. The defensive line has been playing really well. I would say a big riser would be Alex Barrett. The fact that Alex Barrett is getting looks with the first string defensive line is so big because Alex Barrett has been on the practice squad for years. He's been cut by the 49ers probably like 6 or 7 times. I mean, he has been on and off this roster. Alex Barrett low key is like the new Dante Johnson. Always on the roster, like always on the practice squad, always on the team. When he gets on the field, he looks good. And Alex Barrett looks like a guy that had a really strong training camp. He looks like a guy that was able to create a lot of havoc on the interior, and being able to get first team looks as well was really good to see. So I think Alex Barrett is pushing for a roster spot. So that is going to be really, really interesting to see, is if Alex Barrett is a guy who can earn a roster spot, a final 53 for the first time. Um, he's been elevated. He's been called up from the practice squad, so he's played in games, but he's never made the 53 man out of training camp. So if he can make that, then I would absolutely say that Alex Barrett would be a riser. because if you go from career practice squad player to making the 53-man roster on this defensive line, I would say that's a pretty big riser in my opinion. So, I mean, again, as we continue to work through risers, fallers, way more guys rising up than you have guys falling. So I really do think that the 49ers are in pretty good shape through training camp. I feel confident, man. We've talked about it heading into training camp. The expectations are Super Bowl or bust, and I think that's valid. I think that's a valid expectation. The fact that the 49ers right now are considered a Super Bowl contender and should be one of the top, if not the top, Super Bowl contender coming out of the NFC. I fully believe that through training camp. I do. And understanding that Brock Purdy's going to probably be your quarterback one, not probably, he's going to be your quarterback one. The the way that I've seen Brock Purdy get better throughout all of training camp and continue to improve in each and every training camp, finding his footing, getting more comfortable, making his reads, delivering on target, uh, his ball, like the way that the ball is coming out of his hand, improved as the practices have gone on. I feel really good about the 49ers defense, offense, special teams. Jake Moody, biggest riser of training camp. Can we say Jake Moody is the biggest riser of training camp? I mean, he's going to win this kicker battle. He is going to beat out Zane Gonzalez. It's going to happen. Moody's your franchise kicker. We got a franchise kicker, ladies and gentlemen. We have a franchise kicker. I mean, I think back to other legendary 49ers kickers. This is going to be legendary. When we get our first game winner from Moody and we get the chance in the stadium, it's going to be electric. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. You guys know, man, I was shocked that the 49ers took a kicker in the third round. It took me a long time to wrap my head around it. And one of the things that I said is, as long as I get to training camp and I see that this dude is booting, if he's out here new boot goofing and just popping 60 yarders, I'll feel much better. And I saw it and I'm like, yeah. Franchise kicker. We got him. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. I feel really, really freaking good. And great list here. Joe Nedney, David Akers, Phil Dawson, throw in Robbie Gould. Now you got Jake Moody. 49ers have a recent history of having some pretty solid kickers. Shout out Joe Nedney, bro. Real ones remember Joe Nedney out here. I liked Joe. David Akers, of course. I mean, practically was the offense in 2011. You remember our offense in 2011? All we would do was line up with 3 tight ends and a fullback, and we'd run straight. We'd hand it off to Frank Gore, and we'd run straight in between the tackles until we got into field goal range. We'd trot out David Akers, and David Akers would kick field goals, and we'd win football games with David Akers' leg and suffocating defense and just absolutely milking the clock of any time. I mean, we didn't have a great offense in 2011, but boy, did they have a recipe. And the recipe was run the football with Frank Gore, kick field goals with David Akers, and suffocating defense, and just milk the clock, milk all the time off the clock. And these teams would have no chance to score points. So Jake Moody, biggest riser. I'm gonna call Jake Moody the biggest riser of all of training camp. Jake Moody had to prove I would say Jake Moody. You can make the case that the players that had the most to prove in training camp this year were Trey Lance, Brock Purdy, Jake Moody. Isn't that wild? We went into this year's training camp. You list the top 3 players that have something to prove in training camp, 2 quarterbacks and a kicker. I think all have met the bill. So I feel pretty solid about it. And again, overall, um, this team looks good. I'm really confident about this season. What's wild is it kind of feels like this training camp already feels like we're in season from a fan perspective of like arguing, scrutiny. I think honestly, like I think it's and I've stated it. It's pretty annoying, the quarterback discourse amongst our fan base these past couple weeks and throughout all summer. It is what it is. It's really annoying um, to hear the way that people talk about this quarterback situation. But I will actually look at it as a positive because these quarterbacks see it, these players see it, the teams see it, and the level of scrutiny that these guys have been under for training camp is going to make the season feel like a breeze. I feel, like normally I'm all for like, hey man, support your boys. Um, don't rip them for practice and things like that. Practice is fluid and there should be room for mistakes and improvement. But I think there is a positive quality that can be taken away from this rampant, wild quarterback discourse is that these quarterbacks are probably immune to it already. So, in reality, when and if they are scrutinized in season, I think it will impact them less because they've been scrutinized over training camp statistics. So I think we're gonna get into the season. So it's like the fan base. It's like the fan base has almost kind of doing our part a little bit, I guess. If you really want to take the toxicity and spin it for some optimism, these quarterbacks they're already being overly scrutinized through training camp, and you know, maybe that builds up some scar tissue, Maybe that builds up some thicker skin. Maybe that builds up just more stronger ability to block out the noise because they've been dealing with the noise from the second training camp started, before training camp started, all off season. So I think you could potentially look at it as a positive that they've already been up to their eyeballs in scrutiny, and any scrutiny that comes throughout the season, they'll probably shrug it off, just like we shrugged it off. Uh oh! Breaking news! Breaking news! We have our first unofficial depth chart. I'm not even gonna look at it. Let's react to it together. Breaking news! First unofficial depth chart has been released. Let's look at it together because I'm so intrigued by this. I'm about to pull it up. Shout out to Lombardi. Lombardi got it. We're gonna react live to the 49ers first unofficial depth chart of the season. Here it is. All right, what do we got? We're going straight to the quarterback. Oh, we got the or. We got the or. We got Brock Purdy, QB1, Trey Lance, or Sam Darnold, Brandon Allen bringing up the rear. Look, a quick glance. We've got two oars. We've got an oar between Sam and Trey, and we got an oar between Jake Moody and Zane Gonzalez. I love football. I love football so much. I love the things that we like try to put weight into. Oh, so good. So good. All right. What other things do we have? Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel. We got Ray McLeod, Juwan Jennings, Danny Gray, Chris Connolly, Willie Snead ahead of Tate Martin, Daz Newsome, and Isaiah Winstead. Braden Willis behind, Cameron Latu, Ross Dwelly in front. See, look, Charlie Warner is your number 2 tight end, and I really think that is how it's gonna play out. So, what other stuff do we got in here? Offensive line looks to be on point. Defense, Drake Jackson, Eric Armstead. Where's Bosa? Where's Bosa? Just kidding. Bosa's down here. Cleveland's with the starting group. That's basically what the rotation has looked like so far. Oren Burks is running with the linebackers. Isaiah Oliver starting nickel. Starting kick returner, punt returner, Ray McLeod. So, yeah, I don't think there's anything that's really crazy about this. This kind of matches what practice looked like. Someone said, "Where's Mason?" He's right here. He's buried. Mason's right there. So, really nothing. Alex Barrett, they have him listed as a D end, but I've seen him play a lot of interior. I've seen him play a lot on the interior, but he's higher up there. So yeah, I don't think there's anything too crazy. What do you guys think? What are your reactions? Any surprises? Marcelino is right here. He's in front of D Winters. So you got Marcelino, DFF, and Curtis Robinson as your kind of top 3 guys. So not bad, not bad. I got to make a post really quick. 49ers have released their first unofficial depth chart of the season. HT Lombardi post. Post it. All right, we're posted. So any surprises? Anyone? Charlene says my only surprise is the word or. Yeah, I was prepared for it, to be honest, because I forget some other team had posted that their unofficial depth chart, and someone spotted out the or. And so when I saw it, they already had that conversation for another team. And when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, the 49ers are for sure going to have the or. So not a big surprise there. I think the big thing is who's going to be the starting quarterback. week 1 versus the Raiders? Is it gonna be Trey Lance or is it gonna be Sam Darnold? That one's gonna be the interesting one. That's gonna be the interesting question. And again, it's the unofficial depth chart put out by the PR department. Um, so this isn't like an end all be all type anything. But hey, it's always fun to take a look at, have a little blasty blast to see what the unofficial depth chart is looking like. I posted it to Instagram and people are like, or or what does or mean? People, you knew it was coming. You knew it was coming. I think they put or because I don't think they know. It could really be Sam Darnold, it could really be Trey Lance. Like it really could. That's how it wasn't like what was it, like 2 days ago, the last day that Brock Purdy didn't practice. Um it was Trey Lance during install period with the ones, but then to start team period, it was Darnold. So it was like I was like, Kyle is trolling us, and I respect it. I respect it so much. Kyle, I would be doing that same exact thing if I was a coach and I could read through everyone's comments and I would start trolling. I would start trolling people. And so like how it typically works throughout every single training camp practice. If you are the first quarterback out in install, you are the first quarterback to start team. This particular day, where no Brock Purdy, Trey Lance in install period, first guy out, Sam Darnold was the first guy in team. And I was like, you dog, you dog. And then I tweet out no designed runs for Trey Lance throughout training camp, and it gets picked up decently well. And then we get our first designed run very next practice. We know Kyle watches the show. Shout out Kyle. Shout out, shout out Kyle. Appreciate you, Kyle. Don't listen to these other people try to tear you down. Kyle's a good coach. But I thought that was funny. So we got our first unofficial depth chart. Do you know what I think is most exciting about it? Football. That means football's here, ladies and gentlemen. When we're getting excited about unofficial depth charts being put out by PR staffs, that means football is here. Congratulations. We made it. Football is here. We made it through training camp. Now we're getting ready to gear up for joint practices with the Raiders. By the way, Raiders, you suck. How, like, you really not going to make joint you're really not going to make joint practices available to fans, Raiders? Such a typical Raider thing to do. God, I hate the Raiders, man. Such a typical Raider thing to do. Like, nah, we're not going to let anyone come watch our joint practices because we're the Raiders. And we don't want our quarterback to get roasted by social media. So we're not going to let anyone come in, even though they're going to get roasted. You're not going to be able to protect anyone from getting roasted because media is going to put out the same stuff. So, oh man, I liked it better when they were the Oakland Raiders, and trash talking them was more fun. It's not as fun anymore. It's not as fun anymore, man. It's saddening. I wish it was more fun. It was more fun to talk trash about the Raiders. It's not as fun anymore. But hey, we got joint practices. Again, biggest takeaway of today's episode is 49ers are trending in the right direction. 49ers are trending in the right direction. Quarterbacks are trending in the right direction. Really, for the most part, everyone on the roster is trending in the right direction. So I feel good. I feel great. I feel confident about this season. I feel confident about where this team is heading. I feel confident about the expectations that I have for them, which is Super Bowl. And hey, like I said, this team has been dealing with quarterback controversy for a long time. This team has been dealing with doubt for a long time. I don't think that's new to anyone. I think they're battle ready. They're ready to go. So looking forward to it. Shout out to everyone that tapped in on the show. Appreciate you guys. Grab a cookie if you stayed for the whole time. Smash the like button if you haven't already. And if you haven't subbed yet, what are you doing? Appreciate everyone. What do they 49ers are going to be flying out to Las Vegas. I think they get the day off tomorrow. And then we get joint practices Thursday, Friday, and then preseason game on Sunday. Let's go. Shout out to all you guys. Appreciate you. I'm out of here for now. Peace. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Love to see it. Wait, am I still on live? I am. I'm still on live. Bye, guys. I'm glad I wasn't doing anything weird.